You know, we often think that in order to speak English well, we have to start by speaking, that we need to throw ourselves into conversations, try to get the words out, even if they come out broken or slow. And yes, speaking is important, but the real foundation, the quiet, powerful skill that most learners overlook is listening. Listening is the gateway to speaking. It's where real fluency begins. Think about how a baby learns language. They don't start by speaking. For months and months, all they do is listen. They listen to sounds, to emotions, to rhythms. They absorb the music of the language long before they ever say a word. And when they finally do speak, their words aren't perfect, but they're natural. They've been shaped by hours and hours of careful listening. It's exactly the same for us when we're learning a new language, especially British English. British English has its own rhythm, its own intonation, even its own personality. It's not just about vocabulary or grammar. It's about how the words sound together, how they rise and fall, how they're stressed, and how they're relaxed. If you want to speak fluently, you first have to tune your ears. You have to hear the music before you can play it. Listening trains your brain in ways that textbooks simply can't. When you listen to real English, stories, conversations, even everyday phrases, your brain starts to recognize patterns. It starts to predict what's coming next. Without even realizing it, you're building a mental library of sentence structures, pronunciation patterns, and word pairings. You begin to hear which phrases are natural and which ones aren't. You don't just learn a word. You learn how it's used, how it feels, how it lives inside a sentence. That's why stories are so powerful. When you listen to a story in British English, you're not just picking up new vocabulary. You're absorbing language in its most natural form. You're listening to the flow of real speech, the pauses, the emphasis, the way emotions shape the sound, and the best part, your brain loves stories. It remembers them. It learns from them without effort. Listening to stories gives you input that sticks because it's wrapped in meaning. Now, some learners say, but I can't understand everything. I miss words. I get confused. That's okay. That's part of the process. When you listen, your goal isn't to understand 100%. It's to get used to the sound. It's to train your ears to recognize the patterns of English. You don't need to understand every word to learn from it. In fact, struggling a little is good. It means your brain is working. It's stretching, growing, adapting. The more you listen, the more you catch. It's like tuning into a radio station that was full of static, and slowly, over time, the sound becomes clearer. And if you're using subtitles, even better. Subtitles connect sound with meaning. They act like a bridge between what you hear and what you understand. When you read along as you listen, your brain creates strong connections between the word's appearance, its sound, and its usage. It's one of the most effective ways to grow your vocabulary naturally, but eventually try listening without them too. Trust your ears, let them do the work, let them discover the language. Fluency doesn't happen when you speak perfectly. It happens when you understand effortlessly, and that only comes through listening. Just imagine, one day you hear a phrase and you don't have to translate it. You don't have to think. You just know what it means. You feel it. That's fluency. That's what listening gives you. The more time you spend listening, the easier speaking becomes. Not because you memorized more words, but because you've absorbed the sounds, the flow, the logic of English. You'll start speaking without overthinking, because you've heard the language used in real situations again and again. It's in your memory now. It's part of you. So if you're serious about learning to speak English, especially British English, start by listening. Every day, even just a little. Put on a story while you're cooking. Play a dialogue on your way to school or work. Listen to something you enjoy, something that makes you smile. Don't worry about being perfect. Just listen. Let your brain soak it in. The words will come later, and when they do, they'll come naturally. A lot of people think that learning English, especially British English, is all about memorizing grammar rules, verb charts, and sentence structures. And while those things are part of the picture, they're not the full story, because British English isn't just grammar, it's music. And when you start listening to it like music, everything begins to change. Think about it for a moment. Music isn't just notes on a page, right? It's rhythm, tone, emotion, timing. It's what gives life to the melody. Well, British English works the same way. It has its own rhythm, its own musicality. The ups and downs in pitch, the softness of certain sounds, the crispness of others, the way some syllables are stressed and others are relaxed, that's what makes it sound natural. That's what makes it beautiful. If you only focus on grammar, your English might be correct, but it won't feel alive. It'll be stiff, robotic. People will understand you, sure, but you'll miss the nuance. You'll miss the melody. That's why listening, really listening, to British English is so important. Not just to what is being said, but how it's being said. Because in that tone, in that musical flow, is where the real magic of the language lies. Take any sentence, even a simple one, like, I didn't say you could go. Depending on how you say it, the meaning changes completely. If you stress I, it becomes, I didn't say you could go, someone else might have. Stress say, and it becomes, I didn't say you could go. Maybe I implied it, but I didn't say it. The same sentence, different meaning, all because of rhythm and tone. That's not grammar, that's music. This is why it's so helpful to expose yourself to real spoken English. Listen to stories, conversations, interviews, even TV shows. Anything where you can hear natural British English being used in context. When you do this regularly, you start to feel the language, not just understand it. You begin to hear the beat behind the words. You start to notice how speakers breathe between thoughts, how they stretch or shorten certain words for effect, how they soften or emphasize different sounds depending on what they are feeling. That's rhythm. That's flow, that's music, and once you start hearing that music, you begin to internalize it. You'll find yourself mimicking the melody without even trying. You'll start speaking more naturally. Not just repeating memorized phrases, but actually flowing with the language. That's fluency, that's the goal. Now, this doesn't mean you need to become an expert in phonetics or spend hours analyzing audio clips. It simply means becoming aware, start noticing, pay attention to the musical qualities of English. Watch how native speakers move their mouths, listen to the patterns, feel the beat. Try shadowing, that is, repeating what you hear immediately after you hear it. Not only are you training your mouth, but you're also training your ear. And when your ear and your mouth start working together, everything changes. This also explains why some learners speak with a flat or monotone sound. It's not that they don't know English, it's that they haven't yet heard enough of its rhythm. It's like trying to play a song you've never listened to. You might know the notes, but you don't know the feel, and language is all about feel. British English, in particular, is full of subtle musicality. The rise and fall of intonation in polite questions, the way we soften requests, the slight humor in sarcasm delivered through tone alone, these are the things that can't be taught through grammar rule. They can only be learned through immersion, through listening, mimicking, and letting yourself feel the music of the language. So when you're learning English, don't just ask yourself, is this grammatically correct? Ask yourself, does this sound right? Does this feel natural? Those questions will take you further than memorizing 50 irregular verbs ever will. Grammar helps you build the structure, but rhythm, that musical quality, that's what brings it to life. If you want to speak English in a way that connects, that feels real, that sounds authentic, then you have to hear it like music. Let the grammar support you, yes, but let the rhythm lead you. Let your ears guide your tongue. Let your voice dance with the language, because the moment you stop thinking in rules and start feeling the rhythm, that's when your English truly begins to sing. When we think about tools for learning English, we usually jump straight to big things: textbooks, grammar apps, courses, maybe even private tutors. But one of the most powerful tools we have is something so simple, so often overlooked, that many learners don't even realize its value: subtitles. Subtitles are your secret superpower, and once you understand how to use them, they can change everything about the way you learn. Subtitles do something remarkable. They allow you to connect what you hear with what you see. They build a bridge between sound and meaning. When you listen to English and read the words at the same time, your brain isn't just hearing noises. It's mapping those sounds to real language. You're training your listening skills, your reading comprehension, your vocabulary, and even your pronunciation, all at once. What makes subtitles especially magical is that they work in the background. You're not just studying, you're absorbing. You don't have to stop and think about every single word. You're watching a story, you're engaged, and while that's happening, your brain is making constant connections. It's seeing how words are spelled, how they are pronounced, how they fit together in real sentences. That's how language truly sticks, when it's experienced in context, not just memorized in isolation. For beginner and intermediate learners, subtitles act like a safety net. You might not catch every word by ear, and that's okay. The text on the screen gives you clarity. It fills in the blanks. It boosts your confidence because you're not lost. You're following along, and that keeps you motivated. It's the difference between giving up because it's too hard and saying, "Hey, I understood that." And the more you listen with subtitles, the more your ear starts to catch up. Eventually, you rely on them less and less because your listening skills have grown stronger. And subtitles don't just help you understand, they help you speak. When you hear a phrase and see it written at the same time, you internalize it. You learn how it sounds and how it's built. You start to notice the structure of real sentences, how native speakers use expressions, how they shorten or connect words. That kind of natural input is gold. You can try repeating what you hear. Pause, read the subtitle, then say the sentence out loud. It's a small habit that can train your pronunciation and improve your fluency in a way no textbook ever could. What's also great is that subtitles allow you to move at your own pace. You're in control. You can rewind, rewatch, slow down the video, or pause and look up a word. You're not sitting in a classroom waiting for others to catch up, or being rushed ahead before you're ready. This kind of control makes the learning personal. You go as fast or as slow as you need, and that flexibility leads to faster, deeper learning. It also makes learning fun. You're not stuck with boring drills. You can watch stories, shows, interviews, whatever interests you. You're learning English, yes, but through content that feels alive. You're enjoying it, and that joy keeps you coming back. That's the secret most advanced learners know. The more enjoyable your input, the more consistent your practice, and the more consistent your practice, the better your results. Eventually, you'll find that some subtitles become less necessary. You'll hear a phrase and instantly recognize it. You'll catch new words from context alone, and when that happens, it's not luck, it's proof. Proof that your brain has been learning all along. Subtitles were the support you needed to build up that strength. They were your training wheels, and now you're riding. But even advanced learners still benefit from them, because subtitles aren't just for beginners. They are a powerful way to reinforce accuracy. You might think you know how something's spelled or said, but seeing it in text can surprise you. Maybe the accent masked a sound, maybe you misheard a word, Subtitles reveal the details. They sharpen your understanding and remind you that language is always deeper than it seems. So whether you're just starting out or you've been learning for years, never underestimate the power of subtitles. They make the invisible visible. They help you bridge the gap between listening and speaking, hearing and understanding, knowing and using. They turn passive watching into active learning, and they do it in a way that feels effortless. Use them often, use them wisely, and trust that every word you read is another step toward fluency, because subtitles aren't just a tool, they're your secret superpower. One of the biggest mistakes learners make when trying to improve their English is focusing too much on words, just words. They memorize long vocabulary lists, study flashcards every day, and spend hours trying to remember definitions. And yet, when it's time to speak or listen in a real conversation, they freeze. The words don't come. They don't understand what's being said, and they ask why I studied so hard. The truth is, language isn't built on individual words. It's built on meaning, on emotion, on connection. That's why you can't just study words. You have to feel the story. When you hear a story, your brain wakes up. You stop focusing on isolated facts and start paying attention to the journey. You care about what happens next. You imagine the scenes, the people, the voices. That emotional connection helps you learn without trying. You remember the phrases not because you drilled them, but because they meant something to you. They had a purpose, a feeling, a place in the story. Stories give you context, and context is everything. Let's say you're learning the word celebrate. If you only see the word on a flashcard, it's just a definition. But in a story, imagine a character who finally finishes school and their family throws a party. There's laughter, music, cake, maybe even fireworks. That scene stays with you. The word celebrate becomes more than just a word. It becomes a memory. You didn't study it. You felt it. This is why listening to English stories, especially at your level, is so powerful. You're learning in a natural, immersive way. You hear how words are used in real situations. You see how emotions shape the voice. You learn not just what to say, but when and how to say it. That's real English. That's how you learn to speak in a way that sounds authentic, not like a textbook. You might think, but I won't understand every word. That's okay, you don't need to. Your goal isn't to translate every sentence. It's to stay with the feeling. Keep listening, let the story carry you. Use subtitles if you need to, but don't get stuck in the details. You'll be surprised how much you can understand just from tone, context, and repetition. And over time, the words you once didn't know will start to become familiar. You'll hear them again and again, used in different ways, and suddenly they'll just click. This is how children learn, not by studying vocabulary lists, but by being surrounded by language that has meaning. They listen, they absorb, they feel, and then they speak, imperfectly at first, but with growing confidence. You can do the same. It's not about being perfect. It's about being present, being engaged, letting the story do the work. The beautiful thing about stories is that they don't just teach you English. They teach you how to think in English. Instead of translating from your native language, you start to form ideas directly in English. You start to dream in it, react in it, feel in it. That's the power of storytelling. It bypasses memorization and builds real fluency from the inside out. And here's something else. Stories stick with you. If you learn a word from a list, you might forget it tomorrow. But if you hear that same word in a moment that made you laugh, or feel curious, or even cry a little, you'll remember it for life. Because your brain doesn't just store information, it stores experience. And stories are experiences. That's what makes them unforgettable. So instead of thinking, what words should I study today, Ask yourself, what story can I listen to? What can I feel? What moment can I step into? Choose something that interests you. A beginner's story, a short dialogue, a little drama, even a children's tale. It doesn't have to be long. What matters is that it makes you feel something. Because when you're emotionally connected, your brain becomes a sponge. Learning becomes natural, and progress becomes unstoppable. This is the difference between learning English as a subject and living English as a language. When you study words, you train your memory. When you feel the story, you train your soul. One of the biggest myths in language learning is that fluency comes from learning more and more words, as if the key to speaking well is stuffing your brain with vocabulary and hoping it all comes out smoothly. But fluency isn't just about knowing the words, it's about owning them. It's about being able to use them confidently and naturally in real time, and the way to get there isn't through memorization. It's through action. Repeat, shadow, and pause. That's how fluency is built. Repeating may seem simple, but it's powerful. When you repeat what you hear, you're training your brain and your mouth at the same time. You're reinforcing sound, structure, and rhythm. You're not just passively listening. You're actively internalizing the language, and the more you repeat, the more automatic your speech becomes. You stop thinking about grammar. You stop hesitating. The words start to flow because they've been practiced, not just studied. Repetition also helps build muscle memory. Speaking a language isn't just mental, it's physical too. Your mouth needs to learn how to move in a new way. English sounds might not exist in your native language, so your tongue, lips, and throat have to adapt. Repeating the same sentence or phrase again and again helps your mouth become more comfortable. Over time, that comfort turns into speed, and that speed turns into fluency. Then there's shadowing. This is one of the most effective and yet underused techniques in language learning. Shadowing means listening to a native speaker and trying to say the exact same thing at the exact same time, or just a split second after. You copy the rhythm, the tone, the pronunciation. It's like singing along with a song. At first, it's difficult. You might stumble, but the more you do it, the more natural it becomes. You start to sound like a native speaker, not because you've memorized rules, but because you've absorbed the music of the language. Shadowing also sharpens your listening skills. You have to pay close attention, not just to the words, but to the emotion behind them. You start to notice how native speakers stretch sounds, link words, or drop syllables completely. That awareness makes your own speech more fluid. It also helps you understand others better, even in fast conversations, because your brain is already used to hearing English at a natural pace. And then there's pausing. You might not think of pausing as a skill, but it's actually one of the most important parts of fluency. When you pause during practice, you give yourself space to think, to breathe, to reflect. You create a rhythm that mirrors real conversation. You give your brain time to catch up with your mouth, and you learn to speak with confidence, not panic. Many learners rush when they speak. They feel pressure to be fast, so they speak too quickly, trip over words, or lose their train of thought. But fluency isn't about speed, it's about flow. It's about speaking clearly, naturally, with the right timing, and pauses help with that. They allow you to focus on quality, not just quantity, and in real life, they make you sound more thoughtful and confident. So when you're watching a story, or listening to a lesson, or even going through a short English video, don't just listen once and move on. Go back, repeat what you hear, try shadowing a sentence or two. Pause, reflect, then try again. Break it down. Let your voice get used to the sound of the language. It might feel slow at first, but this is the training your brain and mouth need to build fluency that lasts. You don't have to do it for hours. Even 5 or 10 minutes a day can make a huge difference. What matters most is consistency. Fluency doesn't arrive all at once. It grows slowly through small, focused actions. Every time you repeat a sentence, every time you shadow a phrase, every time you pause and try again, you're building something, you're building rhythm, you're building confidence, you're building fluency. This is the kind of practice that turns passive knowledge into active skill. It transforms you from someone who knows English into someone who can use English, and that's the real goal. That's when it becomes natural, comfortable, part of who you are. We often underestimate just how powerful the brain is when it comes to learning a language. We think it's about studying harder, memorizing more, focusing longer. And yes, effort matters, but something much deeper is happening every time you simply sit down and listen. Every minute you listen, your brain rewires, and that's not just a motivational idea. It's neuroscience in action. Your brain isn't a fixed machine. It's constantly changing, adapting, reorganizing itself based on what you do, what you hear, and what you experience. This is called neuroplasticity. It means that with every new sound, every sentence, every repeated phrase in English, your brain is literally creating new connections, new pathways. It's training itself to recognize patterns in the language, to expect certain sounds, to decode meaning faster and more accurately. That's why even when you feel like you're not learning anything in a moment, like when you're just listening to a simple story or watching a video in English, something incredible is happening under the surface. Your ears are collecting input. Your brain is matching it to old knowledge, finding gaps, filling them in, smoothing them out. You don't need to understand every word for your brain to learn. You just need to listen. And the amazing thing is, this kind of learning is automatic. It's natural. It doesn't require you to force anything. Just like a child learning their first language, you're learning by being exposed again and again to the sounds and patterns of English. Your brain does the rest. It takes in the rhythm, the tone, the flow. It remembers how things are said, where the stress goes, what tone expresses what feeling. It absorbs, adapts, and rewires. That's why consistency is so important. Every minute counts. Even 5 minutes a day of active listening is valuable. It's not about cramming in hours and hours once a week. It's about building that daily habit of exposure. The more you hear, the faster your brain adjusts. And the more familiar the language becomes, the easier it gets to speak, to understand, to think in English. Listening also reduces the mental load of speaking. You don't realize it at first, but as your brain rewires itself through regular listening, speaking becomes less of a struggle. You don't have to search for the right words. You don't have to build every sentence from scratch. You've already heard those sentences before, in stories, in conversations, in dialogues. Your brain remembers. It pulls the structure from memory. It knows how the language works because it's heard it work again and again. There's also something deeply comforting about knowing that progress is happening even when you can't see it. Fluency often feels invisible. Some days you might feel stuck. You might think, I've been listening for weeks and I'm still not fluent. But progress is like water dripping on stone. It's slow, it's quiet. But over time, it transforms everything. Every word you hear, even in the background, is shaping your brain, changing it, training it. It's also worth saying that listening is one of the few ways you can practice English without pressure. No one's watching. No one's judging your pronunciation or grammar. You're just absorbing. You're letting the language enter your mind in a relaxed, natural way. And that matters. Because when you learn with less stress, your brain is actually more open. It remembers more, it enjoys the process. That's how learning becomes sustainable. Listening also helps with confidence. When you've heard something enough times, you begin to trust yourself. You hear a question in English and your brain says, "I've heard this before. I know how to answer." That's not theory, it's practice. It's muscle memory for the mind, and it only happens when you've given your brain the input it needs to rewire, restructure, and rebuild itself in English. So if you're ever doubting yourself, if you're wondering whether all that listening is doing anything, remember this. Every minute you listen, something changes, something clicks, something connects. You may not feel it immediately, but your brain is working. Quietly, constantly, brilliantly, the key is to trust the process, to keep showing up, to give your brain the chance to grow into English. Every podcast you play, every video you watch, every story you follow, it all adds up. It all matters, even when you're tired, even when you feel stuck, even when you think you're not learning fast enough, you are. Because every minute you listen, your brain rewires.